I want to talk a little bit about the chiropractic legacy of Dr. Toftness, Dr. Ian Toftness. As I indicated, he was very influential at Logan College, but he was also influential throughout the entire chiropractic profession for a good, I don't know, 50 years or so, from the mid 30s to the mid 80s. He practiced up until shortly before he died in 1990. Um, his name was Irving Norden Orlando Toftness. He dropped the Orlando and even changed it to I, and I think I would have as well. Graduated from Palmer. I say here in 19. Well, yes, I believe in 1932 he graduated. I get that because I found a newspaper clipping that said that he began his practice having purchased a retiring chiropractor's practice in Cumberland in October of 32. So I believe he must have probably graduated from the Palmer School in 1932. And then in 1933, he began studying with H.B. Logan. At that time, and for several years prior, Dr. Logan was teaching his technique, and this 1933 date predates the creation of Logan Basic College of Chiropractic by a couple of years. At least my diploma says, and we were taught historically that Logan College, whatever it was called at the time, Logan Basic College of Chiropractic in St. Louis, was founded in 1935. But he began teaching his methods in 1936, so unbelievable that just 4 years after graduation, he taught his methods, which of course was a combination of the emphasis on the upper cervical spine combined with the light force contact, especially on the sacrotuberous ligament that he learned from basic technique. He was indeed the first of what is now 24 chiropractors in his family. I believe that to be an accurate statement. He and his wife Louise never had children, but between brothers and nieces and nephews and so forth, there are now 24 chiropractic descendants in his family. And while he graduated from Palmer, most graduated from Logan, one from Lincoln, one from National, and a few from Northwestern, I believe. But the majority graduated from Logan College, which I believe is why he had such was so respected at Logan. He had a post-grad school called the Toftness Post-Grad School, in which he taught his technique, and he had a research foundation called the Foundation for the Advancement of Chiropractic Research, FACR. And they would host conventions in the summer and July 4th weekend up in Cumberland, and families would come up for golf tournaments and cookouts, and they'd have speakers, and it was just a neat family event, camaraderie amongst the fellow Toftness practitioners. And he gave an enormous amount of money to our chiropractic schools in form of grants and scholarships and things. My friend Dr. Amy was a recipient of one of Dr. Toftness and his wife's grants, where she went to college at Life University. We had an interest, so we are told, in the work of Dr. Albert Abrams, MD, developer of radionics and known by the AMA as quite a quack, in fact, a gadget quack. If you know anything about radionics, it's basically an instrument with a rubbing plate and a bunch of dials, and you place a picture, a blood sample, a hair sample, a signature of your patient into the instrument, and you rub this plate and you turn these dials and come up with a diagnosis and treatment with the use of this electronic device. I'm not going to say much more about that. They have some of these instruments in the archives at Logan College that I used to get to go and see. I don't know how it works. I don't know if it worked. May have been quackery, but in 1936, Dr. Toftness developed a device that he called the neurolinometer, which was basically a chiropractic version of the radionics machine, basically to find areas of the spine that were of issue and subluxated. I've got a picture of that, I think, next. Yeah. This is a picture from Logan, now Logan University, that was donated by the Toftness family. And, basically, my understanding would be that you would rub that wooden wand over the spine and rub that rectangular plate up above and turn the knobs. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't have any way of really verifying that, but that's the neurolinometer, which is not the sensometer, the Toftness radiation detector, the Toftness research device. In fact, this is what we would think of if we were looking at a Toftness research device or a Toftness radiation detector. And you'll note the handle with a brass stem on the end, because you would place that stem in a cast iron table beside the table with an arm on it so that you could move the instrument over the spine so you could palpate with one hand and rub with the other. That's going to be a distinction between our device and this device and its practical use. But you'll also note the dials on the side, and that would close an aperture on the rubbing plate, perhaps to decrease the amount of radiation going through the instrument. Again, that was Dr. Toftness's theory. I don't believe that the instrument functioned on that principle, but that's my humble opinion. They even had instruments that had a built-in microphone that would have an LED display, and the louder the squeak, then the bright the LED would go from, say, yellow, green, red, something of that nature. But look how big the thing is, and we're going to see in the next slide the inside diagram that he submitted in his patent. And there will be a cone and all of these concave and convex lenses, and then that aperture on the top, and it's all designed and intended to focus the radiation coming off of the patient's spine onto that rubbing plate. I'm going to apologize right now. I'm going to say the same thing over and over and over again when we go to read the patent, because I want you to understand what Dr. Toftness, what he taught that his instrument did, and because we're going to teach something different about our instrument. When you've got something that the FDA has put a permanent ban on, or even a device that works on a similar principle, I want you to understand our instrument, while it might look the same, doesn't function on a similar principle. So this is his patent. And if you look there at the bottom of that monstrous instrument, can you imagine how heavy this thing would be? This cone coming up from the bottom, and then, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 different lenses stacked on top of each other, and then the final cellophane-type rubbing plate. Incredible thing. So I'm going to read from Dr. Toftness's patent, and I am going to apologize right up front. I'm going to be saying the exact same thing over and over again. If I were only telling you what he believed, I'd do that in 1 or 2 paragraphs. But I want you to understand this is what he submitted and what was accepted. He got a patent in December of 1971 for this device. But I want you to hear from his hand exactly what he believed his instrument did and the physiology involved. He says this invention relates to a device particularly adapted to detect and concentrate a certain frequency of radiation emanating from the human body. Areas in the spinal column have been found to emit a radiation which has been found by laboratory tests utilizing a radiometer to be on the order of 69.5 gigahertz. This frequency is well beyond the lower end of the infrared spectrum and is difficult of detection and not detected by infrared methods. The areas appear to represent neurological disturbances of sources of body distress. This invention embodies the use of a readily handled lens system consisting of lenses having a clear window to pass a radiation on the order of 69.5 gigahertz and which operate to collect a wide spherical angle of said radiation and concentrate and focus the same onto a detection plate upon which an operator may detect said radiation by sensory perception, or in other words, by finger touch. Thus, with the use of this invention, areas of neurologic disturbance are readily detected. This invention provides for such a concentration of said radiation as to make detection possible of such low levels of radiation as might otherwise go undetected. It is an object of the invention, therefore, to provide a lens system for sensory detection of a particular radiation emanating from the human body. It is another object of the invention to provide a lens system comprising of, in a combination, lenses having components to form a clear window for transmission of a radiation on the order of 69.5 gigahertz. It is a further object of this invention to provide a plurality of lenses arranged to collect a wide spherical angle radiation of 69.5 gigahertz and do focus the same onto a detection plate for sensory detection. If you see this slide, you recognize that I'm pulling pieces out. He's not just repeating the same thing over and over again. I'm just pulling things from the patent that aren't really as important to solidify his study or his story and to clarify what he believed his instrument did, the focus he put on the instrument and the device, as opposed to we, the practitioner, being the device, and the simplicity of our interface is that it is just a simple tool for us to monitor our physiology, our autonomic nervous system response. So I continue. Said device is shown consisting of a cylindrical housing which may be formed of suitable plastic material. Said housing comprises a main body portion. Disposed within the main body portion are a plurality of lenses. The lenses are concave, convex, having their concave surfaces outwardly or oppositely disposed. He goes on to describe the arrangement of the lenses in the body. And again, I apologize that I read the same thing over and over and over again, but that's his description of his device for his patent, and it's really the only thing I have to go by. In operation, the device will be taken in by hand by handle to scan the body, such as the spinal column thereof. By laboratory tests using elaborate equipment, it has been found that some areas of the body, such as areas of neurologic disturbance, i.e. subluxation, will emit a radiation of greater or lesser intensity of frequency on the order of 69.5 gigahertz. The location of such areas by the use of this device are readily and accurately accomplished. Is detected by finger touch upon the plate. The operator will physically sense the radiation. And herein lies a big difference between what I believe and teach and what Dr. Toftness believed, said, or taught. He says here that the finger detects, the operator will physically sense the radiation. I will tell you that we do not feel a radiation coming off of the patient when we rub our plate. Instead, our physiology changes, i.e. our fingertips become more moist with sweat. Then when dragging on this rubbing plate, a noise is created. And as we go through, yes, I am making it do that right now. Go into great lengths to talk about how you use this and how you take it from a conscious effort to a subconscious effort. And we go into that a little bit more. In actual practice, the device has been very successful, and particularly in locating areas of radiation of such low magnitude as would otherwise be undetected. So, ad nauseum, again, I apologize, but you understand what he was thinking. In our approach, someone would say, well, how is your device different than his? And without this explanation, if you saw him rubbing his instrument over the patient, and then you saw me rubbing my instrument over the patient, you would say, that's the exact same thing. And you would be right. The difference lies in the focus of him on what his instrument did and me on what this device allows you, the practitioner, to be able to capitalize on. And it's a huge difference. And when the FDA says that they put a permanent ban on the Toftness radiation detector, the Toftness instrument, or anything that functions on a similar principle, this is a different principle. So next, I want to read for you an article written by a medical doctor by the name of Stephen Barrett. She's a psychiatrist, and the self-proclaimed Quack Watch has a website, quackwatch.com. Also has a website called Chirobase, in which he just bashes every technique you can name and imagine. Everything that's not mainstream medicine, even, as I said earlier, things like vitamin C. And he can't stand RFK. And, RFK Jr. is certainly a hero to many in our profession these days. So anyway, I'm going to read this article called "The Toftness Radiation Detector is a Bogus Device" by Stephen M. Barrett. I will say this about Dr. Barrett. He did a good job at researching it. Yes, he doesn't like Dr. Toftness. He doesn't like you. He doesn't like me. He doesn't like any of us. But it's a well-documented article. And so it starts, "The Toftness radiation detector is a handheld instrument claimed to detect low levels of electromagnetic radiation from the human body and focus it so that a chiropractor could detect conditions requiring treatment. The device, patented in 1971 and then again in 1984, consists of a plastic cylinder containing a series of plastic lenses." Well, you saw the picture. "And its inventor, chiropractor Irwin N. Toftness, Ian Toftness, gives his birth and death, claimed that energy with a frequency of 69.5 gigahertz emanates from compressed spinal nerves. According to an article in Dynamic Chiropractic, Toftness was a disciple of Albert Abrams, MD, a man whom the AMA considered the dean of gadget quacks. In 1936, Toftness began developing a version of an Abrams radionics device for the chiropractic profession. Well, it didn't last long, and you saw a picture of it. He started with a plate similar to a drum head that was rubbed, producing a crackling sound similar to that of a Geiger counter. It doesn't produce a crackling sound similar to a Geiger counter. Basically, from my perspective, this moisture in your fingertips rubbing on that dry surface creates a resistance and it makes a noise. Toftness claims he could feel heat arising from the spine by simply holding his hand over the patient. I kind of read that wrong. Toftness claimed he could feel heat arising from the spine simply by holding his hand over the patient. But because his colleagues could not reproduce what he felt, he developed his device to amplify the heat. Now wait a minute. Dr. Toftness never said anything about amplifying the heat in his patent. He allegedly felt when a subluxation or disease were present. He never said anything about disease in that patent. The device supposedly focused the radiation so the chiropractor could detect it while rubbing his fingers on the detection plate. Rubbing hard could produce a crackling sound. Well, now you're basically just accusing him of manipulating the thing. So rubbing hard could produce a crackling sound. According to Toftness, when the lens came to a diseased part of the back, the operator's fingers would encounter increased friction and start to stick on the rubbing plate. The more crackles, supposedly, the greater the nerve interference or subluxation. The purported disturbances would then be treated by low-force spinal adjustments. Yeah, of about 4 to 7 ounces of force. Nobody ever died or got a broken back or got injured with a light sustained contact of 4 to 7 ounces. Toftness conducted seminars to train chiropractors in the use of his apparatus, which he would lease for use in their own offices. The device was originally called the neurolinometer. Later, he redesigned it and marketed it under various names: Toftness Research Instrument, Toftness Radiation Detector, and others. And this is important. Yale University's Edmund S. Krellin, Ph.D., who tested a Toftness radiation detector for the FDA, concluded it was hocus pocus. He pointed out that a radiation at 69.5 gigahertz would penetrate only about 1 millimeter of body tissue, while the spinal nerves are 2 to 3 inches from the body's surface. So even if a dysfunctional nerve could radiate a tiny amount of energy claimed by Toftness, the radiation would be absorbed by surrounding tissues and would not be detectable at or above the body's tissue. So they get this PhD from Yale. I did some research. His PhD was in anatomy. You had an anatomy professor. Do you think your anatomy professor, if handed an instrument like this, would be qualified to determine whether or not it could work or not? You know, and let's say that I gave you a what do you call a Scottish bagpipes? Let's say I gave you a set of bagpipes. You don't have any real interest in music. You don't have any interest in bagpipes. And I said, here, can you play this? And you said, no. And I said, but you're a doctor of chiropractic. So, you know, they get a PhD whose PhD is in anatomy. He knows everything about the human body. He knows where the spinal nerves are and so forth. His conclusion, based on his understanding of anatomy, is that Dr. Toftness's proposed hypothesis is hocus pocus. But he investigates the instrument, probably paid by the FDA. I don't know. He probably did not do this make his opinion for free. So there may have been an ulterior motive. You know, the FDA is paying me. I'm going to say whatever they want me to say. But if you have no desire to make something work or to understand how something works or to be trained in something, and you have a degree that they're looking for, so be it. Point of order, a lot of our friends and colleagues from New Beginnings are in the Red Banks, New Jersey area, and that's where this Dr. Krellin was from. Oh, you're going to love this. In 1989, 2 chiropractors studied the use of a Toftness radiation detector to look for upper cervical subluxations in 50 patients. Get this. Since upper cervical subluxation has no anatomical reality, the study was meaningless on its face. Okay, that's Stephen Barrett's opinion. He doesn't even believe there's such a thing as an upper cervical subluxation, so he discredits anything that these chiropractors found. Nevertheless, the authors concluded that the device had fair but inadequate reliability. Again, you can't use a hammer on a screw and say it doesn't work. Not long afterward, the device was redesigned and renamed the sensometer. That doesn't matter. So, I humbly submit an alternative explanation, not because Dr. Toftness was wrong, but because I and many others suggest a different explanation, a different understanding of the practitioner's physiology, the practitioner's anatomy. I call it this great app that you came with from the factory that you didn't even know that you had. But, you know, I think that when we understand the pathways of sensory input, processing by the central processing unit, with an output, the same output that causes our heart rate to beat at a certain rate, our heart rate to beat at a variable rate, respiration, skin temperature, brainwave activity, and electrodermal activity. One other thing of note in Dr. Barrett's article, he talks about the idea that the FDA was Dr. Toftness's constant foe, and he says it took the FDA more than 70 years to stop the overt marketing of Toftness's device in interstate commerce. And he talks about different practitioners whose names I will not use, but different cases in which a practitioner receives a ruling by their chiropractic board for association with the Toftness instrument. Here's one. In 1988, the Arizona Board of Chiropractic Examiners filed a complaint against a chiropractor. In 1990, the board concluded that he had engaged in unprofessional or dishonorable conduct by A, telling a wheelchair-bound patient with chronic multiple sclerosis that she would be walking again in 6 months, B, prescribing vitamins and other nutritional supplements after taking a hair analysis, and C, using a Toftness device. The board fined this doctor $1,000 and suspended his license for 3 months. Okay, so, their ruling, they just make a mention that he had a Toftness-like device. It may or may not have been one of Dr. Toftness's instruments. Certainly there have been others that have manufactured similar devices, but, this is a reference that Dr. Barrett uses in his article. The first thing out of the gate is he told a wheelchair-bound multiple sclerosis patient that they'd be walking in 6 months. Now, did he claim that? Did he promise it, or did he say, I have a vision that we're going to get you so functioning so well and adapting and restore life, health, and vitality? Maybe even you'll be walking again. Who knows? Well, I have no idea what the doctor said, but if you're so stupid as to tell a wheelchair patient that they're going to be wheelchair free in 6 months, and that's your claim and that's your promise, well, then you probably do deserve a board sanction. But, to throw the Toftness, Dr. Toftness under the bus along with hair analysis and nutrition, and my gosh, okay, what state doesn't have a chiropractor that does nutritional assessments with hair analysis? And who doesn't submit the possibility of a healing if we can remove interference and your innate intelligence expresses at an ideal level? I don't know what was said, but Dr. Toftness gets thrown under the bus because this guy also had an instrument similar to his. In 1992, the state of Oregon prosecuted 4 chiropractors who'd been accused of using a Toftness-like device in their practices. Although the chiropractors claimed to have abandoned the outlawed Toftness device. Outlawed? Serious? Their derivative designed by one... Oh, okay, so theirs wasn't even a Toftness device. It was something made by somebody else. There really isn't anything here. In 1994, the Arkansas State Board of Chiropractic Examiners reprimanded so-and-so, fined him $1,000, and placed him on probation for 2 years. As part of the case settlement, he was required to stop using a Toftness device in the treatment of patients. Treatment? What about assessment? Well, I'm not using this device. This device isn't putting in anything into the patient. It's not taking anything away. It's me monitoring my own physiologic response. It's no different than a stethoscope in a medical doctor's ears. It's no different than an athlete monitoring his heart rate variability at the gym. It's simply an opportunity for me to monitor my physiology. Is anybody on the planet, does anyone on the planet have the right to tell me I cannot monitor my physiology while I'm conducting a chiropractic assessment or evaluation. Anyway, some of these board rulings, 2003, a Wisconsin Chiropractic Examining Board voted to revoke the license of a chiropractor based on his use of a Toftness sensometer and 3 other dubious approaches. Well, what if the Toftness instrument had nothing to do with it? Dubious approaches, neuro-organizational technique, neuro-emotional technique, and live cell analysis. Those were the other 3 things, and in addition to the Toftness instrument that these practitioners were, or this practitioner was using, and they revoked his license. There is no scientific basis for concluding that the device is a viable diagnostic tool. I'm not going to read any more of these. You feel the prejudice and so forth. But you kind of can also get that if we communicate chiropractic that we're diagnosing and treating, that means you're ruling out any other medical situation and you're claiming to treat it and so forth. From an objective, straight, non-therapeutic chiropractic approach, whereby my professional objective is to locate, analyze, and facilitate the correction of vertebral subluxation, and recognizing that the device does nothing but serve as a convenient surface with a handle for me to monitor subtle electrodermal changes. I've said this 150 times, and I'll probably say it 150 more times in the course of this seminar, because we have to show respect for Dr. Toftness. We have to also show where we deviate from his explanations. So again, what's the difference between what you do and what Dr. Toftness did? It's in the explanation. We would never use a tool to diagnose or treat a medical condition. We don't diagnose or treat medical conditions. Again, if we looked at what I did and we looked at what Dr. Toftness did, we'd say that's hauntingly similar. But he would share with you his explanation. I would share with you my explanation. Then I would humbly submit that for 40 years, because of an FDA ruling, chiropractors have not been taught this technology. They have not been able to use it. And that is a crying shame. That's an absolute crying shame. I feel for all of the chiropractors who've practiced in the last 40 years who did not have access to a simple device that they could monitor from what's going into their central nervous system through the sensory input of the heart and the intuition and the gut and the 5 senses and any additional senses that we have processed through the brain, and then amplify or monitor the subtle physiologic response that's taking place, because God gave you an autonomic nervous system and a central nervous system. And while I oftentimes say God didn't give you a nervous system, God didn't give you a musculoskeletal system, God didn't give you an immune system, God gave you an entire system. It's netter, it's gray, that divides everything up. It's the medical profession that divides everything up. But you came equipped with an autonomic nervous system, a sympathetic branch thereof, a parasympathetic branch thereof, vagus nerve. You came with all this stuff. And every second of your day, whether you knew it or not, there were subtle, energetic changes taking place in your fingertips. If you'd been able to tap into that information, you would have had a certain layer of confidence, competency, and certainty in what you are looking for and finding in your patient, perhaps. That's all I'm suggesting. We have a simplified version of the instrument. No cones, no magnifying lenses, no apertures. Yes, it has a rubbing plate. It just fits on a convenient thing that I designed with a handle that, for convenience sake, we can use to monitor our galvanic scare response. Next, we're going to demonstrate a little bit more of the physiology, dig a little bit deeper in our sensory nervous system, our sensory input, how intuition works, how mental imagery works, how the brain processes this arousal state that we are in when we find a subluxation, when we figure out whether our force needs to be right or left, and we get this output from our sweat gland activity in our fingertips. That's a sympathetic response. So that's what's coming up next.